So thank you for coming along to the session. It's going to be an introduction to the dissertation and particularly getting you to start thinking early in terms of what you need to be doing next. Because, of course, I would suspect from all of you it's the first time you've done something like this, so it's quite a big undertaking. To make sure you're in the right room, this is talking about the empirical dissertation. If you're on a degree programme which is accredited by the BPS, the British Psychological Society, for those who haven't yet figured that out, then you need to be doing an empirical dissertation, which will be different from some of your other colleagues on non-BPS accredited programmes, or people doing dissertations in other subjects altogether. What we require you to do it for a psychology dissertation sometimes has made you feel as though you've been asked to do quite a bit more. But it's something that's required as part of the BPS. I'll explain in a minute what it's going to involve. And it's something we've all done. All as psychologists who have done this kind of dissertation work. So if you're not here for empirical dissertation, now's the time to leave. You're fine, you're on the right room, it's a good start. So I'm module leader. For those who haven't yet met me, I'm Matthew Smith. You haven't got to look quite so pleased about that, not met me before. I'm going to be the module leader for dissertation, so any queries in general about dissertation can be addressed to me. As we'll discover, one of your first points of contact will be your supervisor. The information about who your allocated supervisor is now online, available on Blackboard. Okay? So that information is already there for you to look at if you haven't yet done so. In terms of focusing on the positive side of these things, this is not part of the dissertation module itself, but last year you'll remember coming along to a dissertation conference when you heard some of our then third years presenting the outcomes of their research. We're planning to do that again this year. We already have a date in the diary. It's Wednesday the 6th of May next year. That's about, I think, a week after you will have submitted your dissertation. So this comes after the fact, basically. And you're not required to present at the conference. We would like you to. We'd like as many of you as possible to volunteer to either present an oral presentation, so you're standing here and presenting to the group, or giving posters, like these folks have. And this is something we would encourage you to do it. The idea is it's an opportunity to share your work. You can do it in either way, presentation or poster. And I'm looking at Piers when I say this. There are prizes. There are prizes. He's committed to it. So there will be prizes of sorts. We haven't told what they're going to be yet. So it's worth doing it. And also, I think everybody who's taken part in it, whether doing an oral presentation or a poster, have always said how valuable they felt it was doing it. Maybe half an hour before, they wish they hadn't, because they get nervous about it and so on. But they've always thought it's been a really helpful thing to do. And it looks good on the CV as well. So that's something we want to encourage as many of you as possible to think about doing. But that's something over and above the actual dissertation module itself. So let's talk through what that's going to involve. In terms of what we're going to cover today, I want to talk to you about the dissertation process, what it actually involves, what a dissertation is, so what you're working towards, how supervision works, which is a key part of it. A big part of this module is your link with your supervisor. So after today, that's where much of your interaction is going to be going on. Okay, so we need to make sure we're clear about that. Also talk you through some important dates, and then get you to think about what's next, which will essentially mean linking up with your supervisor, making some initial contact. All the dates that I'm going to talk you through and on these slides will be on Blackboard. Also the module guide is already on Blackboard as well, which should have all these dates on there. If you spot any what appears to be erroneous dates, like a 2013 in there, let me know and I can make it the change. Occasionally it happens. So that's what we're planning to talk to you about. So what is it? In general terms, then, it's a substantial piece of independent research, and this bit in italics, so it's obviously quite important, under the guidance of a supervisor. So it's not just something which you go off and do on your own, and sometime in April next year you present it. That's not going to work like that. There are lots of reasons why it won't work like that, as we'll see. So it's important about building this relationship with your supervisor. So but it is also an independent piece of work. It's your work. It's something that really should encapsulate a big chunk of your degree. It should be the place where you can bring all your interests together and do something that really interests you. And that can also be done in liaising with your supervisor. They may have shared interests there. They may have ideas of way in which you can shape some of those proposals. So that's what we're looking for. As I said, then it's an empirical piece of work. And by that, it usually typically means that you're going to involve some degree of data collection. So that's analysing that data. Whereas Other degree programmes may have something where you can do a library-based dissertation, which is basically a very large literature review, for example. Your dissertation will include a lit review, but you will also need to be collecting and analysing data. So it's something that is quite substantial. Oh, not sure why it's doing that bit. So it'll have all these elements to it. You should clearly identify an issue that needs investigation. That means you need to then specify some particular hypotheses or a more general research question. So of course, if you're doing a qualitative piece of work, you won't really have a hypothesis you're testing. You'll have research questions you want to explore. Again, something you'll need to discuss with your supervisor. And the idea is it should build upon previous research. In my experience, some dissertations, they're all quite interesting, but there's a bit of a, well, why are you doing it? How does it build upon previous research? That's something you want to be thinking about now. I think all of you will have already started thinking about this, because at the end of that last module, Empirical Psychology, you would have given a presentation when you outlined your research proposals. We suggested you could use that as a basis for dissertation ideas. You don't have to. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I've changed my mind now, I want to do something completely different, that's okay, that's allowed, something to discuss with your supervisor, but if you've already developed some ideas as part of that, you know what you're building upon. Again, something to discuss with your supervisor in terms of how you're going to refine those ideas, build upon them and so on. And a big chunk of it is thinking about, well, what's gone before, how does it build upon previous research? Then you've got to think about then, what is it a particular hypothesis, is it a research question, how are you going to try to address those questions? So what kind of data you're going to be trying to collect, how you analyse that data, which is obviously a big sticking point for many of us, so it's something we'll encourage you to think about early on. Don't wait until you've collected your data, then go, right, how do I then analyse it? This is something to think about early on in terms of how you'll analyse any data you collect. Then a discussion of the findings in relation to previous research and theories, and also consider the implications of your findings and evaluate your study. These bits here obviously will form within this discussion part of the dissertation. You've all written reports as part of the empirical psychology module. Essentially, the dissertation becomes a much bigger one of those. Because as you'll see, the final dissertation is around about 10,000 words, with the usual plus or minus 10%. Any questions so far regarding just the general question of what's involved? So you'll see it's quite a substantial amount of work involved, but you do have quite a bit of time to do it. At the same time, you don't want to just sort of sit there and let it drift, because that time will soon go. Before you know it, it will be April next year and you'll have done it all. You'll be out of the way. But to get to that point, there's a lot of work to be done. So we can do what we can to guide you through that. And that's what supervision is about. So first of all, you're allocated a supervisor. In nearly all cases, we try to do in all cases, we try to allocate you to one of your preferred supervisors. If you submitted an initial topic form, back in May, I think it was, then we've used that information to help identify a possible supervisor. It's not always been possible to allocate your preferred supervisor. It's the nature of things. Because not everybody on the team is supervising dissertations, they'll have so many they can actually do. So if it turns out you haven't got your preferred supervisor, then we can find ways in which you manage that, because obviously the general idea is any of us can supervise essentially any project and any topic. We will have all supervised topics in different areas that aren't necessarily related to our own research areas. So we're still able to do that. A big part of a supervisor is keeping you on track, making sure you're doing what you feel as though you should be doing at the certain points. So the supervisor, so when you've seen the list on Blackboard, if you've looked at it, the one that's listed as your first supervisor, that's your supervisor, the one you'll be linking with and working with primarily. You're also allocated a second supervisor as an additional point of contact. By and large, you won't necessarily have that much interaction with your second supervisor. This will be the person who will be a second marker. So the first marker is your supervisor, the second supervisor is the second marker, and they eventually will agree a mark. Also, a sample of them will go to an external examiner, and so on. So the idea of having a second supervisor and their names, so you know who that person will be, is that if for any reason you have difficulty contacting your first supervisor, there's somebody else there you know you can go to that can feel as though, well, I can maybe help you to kind of link back in with the first supervisor. They're also there in a supporting role for the first supervisor. So it's not a case you need to meet with both of those people. It's the person linked down as your first supervisor is the person you are going to be working with. Is that okay in terms of that's going to work? And also as a third point of call, if there's any reasons you have difficulty contacting either, then me as the module leader. Okay, I'm here to be able to pick up any questions. I can maybe help again back to making that contact if for any reason problems have arisen. So your first thing to do is to make contact as soon as possible. So we've got some folks here today, some of the team are supervising. Opportunities today to say hello, realise that you are one of their students. How do they want to take it forward? It may well be that folks who aren't here today, for a variety of reasons, may send you an email to make that appointment. But the responsibility comes down to you. It's your responsibility to make sure that contact is made. Don't leave it and leave it and leave it and say, well, actually, no one ever contacted me. So this is your opportunity to make sure you've made contact and know what you need to do next. More generally then, is you're going to meet regularly. Now you'll need to discuss this and liaise with your supervisor about how to do that. Because each member of the team may do it in a slightly different way. And we need to agree what will work out best for both of you. In terms of how much time allocated, in theory, we're supposed to allocate around about 6 hours per student across the entire year. Now I think the usual feeling is, that doesn't sound like very much. You think, or it feels like it's plenty? Well, in many ways I would say some of you will probably have more than that. But the reason why I'm putting up here, that's what the kind of entitlement is. If you feel as though you are having a lot more than that, then you're getting it because we're willing to give you a bit of that extra time because you might need it, or there's certain times when you need more interaction. But the expectation is that's what you should be looking for. So at the very least, at the same time, you shouldn't necessarily be thinking, well, I've had 30 hours, because that time, say, 7 or 8 students, is a lot of time. As we'll discover, there'll be certain times of the year where you have more interaction and certain times maybe less interaction. So that's the plan, so you will meet regularly. And the supervisor will monitor your progress, get a sense of what needs to be done next, and make sure they do what they can to encourage you to do it. And that's even when things are going well. One of the lines I often bring out here is, don't see your supervisor as somebody you need to appease. That's not a good system to have. It shouldn't be because, oh no, I'm seeing supervisor next week and I haven't really done what I should do. How do I get them off my back? How do I make sure they're going to be okay with things? Ideally, if there's for any reason, and often good reasons, why you're not doing so, then let us know, tell us. Don't come along to a meeting you've planned, which was supposed to be discussing, say, your lit review or your hypotheses or whatever it might be, and you have not thought about it, not done anything. Then don't just waste the time by having the meeting. If you need to, rearrange it. Again, it's about managing that relationship. So we'll help you monitor the progress, so it doesn't feel as though it's this huge piece of work. We can help break it down into different chunks. We can give advice and feedback, again, even when it is going well. So some of the early discussions will be talking through any ideas you already do have. They'll feedback suggestions of maybe improving it. Have you thought about this? What about that? How will you do this side of it? Feedback on anything you then produce. This is particularly down the line. As we'll see, there's some potential dates we can suggest where you can submit drafts of your work and your supervisor will give some feedback on that. We can look at how that will work in detail, and some of that will come through discussing with the supervisor. As I've said, they will be one of the 2 markers in dissertation. If for no other reason, that reason alone is why you want to build a good working relationship with that person. They're going to be one of the people marking your dissertations.